Welcome to the MSU Deer Labs online seminar series brought to you by the Mississippi State University Extension Service and the Forest and Wildlife Research Center. My name is Bronson Strickland. I will be your presenter today, and I'm the St. John Family Professor of Wildlife Management and co-director of the MSU Deer Lab. Regarding a property's potential, we need to review some basics here about variation that we see regionally. In Mississippi, we have a lot of different physiographic regions or soil regions, and what you see on this slide is essentially the primary ones. Let me see if I can use my pen here. We've got the Delta region, which is over here. This is our agricultural region, so it is mainly composed of, of course there's cover, but there's also a tremendous amount of soybean and corn production. Now, in terms of deer, that means there is an abundance or even an overabundance of food. And then we have what is called the Lurse, even though it looks like Los here, but it's pronounced Lurse. The Lurse region of Mississippi, also called the Hills, and think of it as it's a region with good soil quality, but there's a good mix. There's some agriculture, there's some pasture, there's some forest land, but it's good high quality soil and a good mix of different land management types in terms of ag, forest, pasture, etc. Then here in the green we have the upper coastal plain, and again it's very similar to the Lurse in terms of land use. But generally the soil quality isn't as good, a much higher clay content component. We still see a lot of forest land, we see a lot of pasture land, not as much agriculture than we would see in other regions, especially in the Delta. Then we have the lower coastal plain, and this region's characterized by sandier soils. Most people would regard it as lower quality soils. Sandy, more acidic, etc. And this is primarily characterized by forest land and primarily pine management and industrial pine management. That is what dominates the landscape. And then at the very bottom here is the coastal region, and that is kind of what you would envision, some forest land, some marshland, also again lower quality soil, very deep sand. And what we see over the decades that data have been collected by our state wildlife agency, the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, we see a really big difference in the average mature deer, mature buck, that comes from these regions. And we see on average about a 30-inch difference in antler size. So your average mature buck over in the Delta is going to be in the 130s, usually about 135, give or take. There's some bigger, there's some smaller, but that's your average. And notice how that staircases down till we get all the way to the lower coastal plain and the coast or coastal flatwoods, and that's going to be 20 to 30 inch difference. So your potential is defined by your soil and the land use. And soil quality is important. It in fact does affect the plant quality. But what is far more important is that soil is going to affect land use. So it is no surprise that in the Delta region, where we have these really good alluvial soils, that is where we see agriculture. So from a deer food perspective, it's like a win-win. You have natural forage that's of really good quality, but what is far more important is you have agriculture. So you're producing so much food that deer can consume. Contrast that with the lower coastal plain and the coastal flatwoods, where you have a landscape that is conducive to growing a forest. And that makes perfect sense in that environment. That is really smart use of the land in terms of profitability. The consequence is forest land, or when you have a large area that's dominated by a forest or growing trees, you're not growing deer food. And so all of the sun's energy that is going into plant growth is going into growing, in this region for the most part, in growing pine trees. And so we're not growing those very valuable herbaceous forbs that's kind of the building blocks of a deer's diet. So I wanted to review that. Think about where you're at and what your potential is in terms of your pathway to success, depending on not just what is going on your land, but think about surrounding. Think about a scale of thousands of acres around you. What does the landscape look like? And that's really going to affect, your potential and your success for your property.